Here we are with Jeremy Cooper at Helium now, a pretty new employee, right?
Yeah, well, October 4th, I think, is officially when we said I started.
Congratulations. It's a pretty cool thing. And I know what you do for Helium, and kind of what we're going to be talking about now is mostly MOC, the Manufacturing Oversight Committee. But I wanted to start somewhere else so that people got an idea of your background. I wanted to start on, I think it's April 11th, 1970. Which was when...
yeah. Well, gee, so that sounds like the moment that a famous spacecraft took off from Cape Canaveral in Florida, and that would be Apollo 13, the Apollo project. That would be the third attempt to land on the moon. Of course, it didn't happen. Really, what happened in that first attempt is, of course, Apollo 11, which did make it all the way, very famous. And some number of years later, approximately 50 actually, 48 really, a guy named Ben Feist set up a website where you can listen to all of the audio from the mission and see it in real time and mess with, like, clicking and sit down right next to Capcom, who was the person talking to the astronauts, or go to the flight director's chair and sit down and listen to them. There's this amazing website still up there called Apollo in Real Time. And he did a lot of work in getting all of this archival audio off of tapes through the help of some other NASA people and some professors at some other universities who put in grants. There's a whole backstory of this. But what got me super interested in this is I was listening to this on the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 in 2019. And I heard some funny sounds on the tape recordings that I was absolutely certain were telephone tones. Back when, before computers completely ruled the phone networks, and right before the internet, the phone network was actually run by these switches, which would actually talk to each other. And I heard tones that I was pretty certain were two phone switches talking to each other right in the middle of the moon landing. You could hear Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin talking to Earth. And in between their talking, you'd hear, and I go, what the heck is that? So I got intensely interested in that, and I went on a project to try to decode these tones, because I thought, wouldn't it be funny if we found out that some phone lines got crossed in Houston, Texas, and some grandson's talking to his grandmother, and she's phoned him up, and he's like, Grandma, look, there's this thing happening right now on TV. Are you watching it? No, talk to me about your day. Did you get the cupcakes I got? Whatever. I was hoping that this would be like a funny phone conversation, which is happening, just crossing the wires between Houston, somebody in Houston calling through, and just happening to touch the wires that also go out to the Goddard Space Center and then out to Spain and then up to the moon. Still working on that project. But in the course of trying to get that ready, I found out that the tapes are badly damaged. The original tapes, in order to get these tones out, I have to really clean them up. So I embarked on writing an algorithm to fix a very severe problem with the audio called flutter. And it turns out in doing so, I had done something that NASA was trying to do and worked really hard, and that Ben worked on. But I took a different approach, and I, just to get it really locked in so I could get these tones out, I worked insanely hard on this algorithm, and I got it perfect as near as could be. There's actually still more tweaks. But so when I found all this information out, I did a nice one-frame Twitter post that showed the graphic of the tones I had found, where in the mission timeline they were from, what channel, what tape. And I asked all the phone freaks, the other people who are even more insanely interested in how the phone network worked in the 60s, to try to figure out what this phone number was. I predicted it was 551, 0669 or something like that. It turns out that's not a local phone number. So the mystery deepens. But in the course of doing that, and when I posted that, Ben Feist, who runs his website that got me into all of this, who I was thinking, oh, you know what, it'd be so cool to be part of that team, but, I'm a nobody. There's no way. He actually reached out and said, how did you deflutter the audio? That was his first question, because he knew that I had to do something special to do that. So I said, well, here it is. I wrote this program, and here's some defluttered samples. And he said, we're working on Apollo 13 right now. Would you like to join the team, and let's use your algorithm to flatten and deflutter all of the Apollo 13 audio? And we could make you part of Apollo in Real Time for the Apollo 13 project. I thought, are you kidding? You could have asked me even before. I would have said, yes, this is such a cool website. So I got involved doing that. And as a course of doing that, I actually got to go tour NASA and touch and be there for a recording session where we're digitizing some of these tapes that have been in frozen storage or cold storage for 50 years. And I got to be there in the room. We took out one of the tape which has the famous phrase, Houston, we've had a problem. This is the moment in Apollo 13 where they discover that basically they're not going to land on the moon, and they're not even certain if they're going to make it back to Earth alive. So incredible nerves of steel astronauts there, but be able to touch that and be part of that history, it's something I'm still working on. We're going to do Apollo 16 next. So that's what April 11th, 1970, I believe is the launch date of.
It is. I was watching it today. It may not be quite as exciting today, but as it was then, but it's pretty damn exciting. I'm just sitting there. I was like, I'll just check this out. And 10 minutes later, I'm like, holy shit, this is pretty exciting stuff. Rad demonstration of kind of who you are. So I think of you as like this ultra geek history buff and really into how things work at a level that most people just completely don't understand.
There's so much of the world that you can dig into, though. Like, I think anybody, if you really get into what you're nerdy about, when you find something that really interests you, that's the thing I like sharing with other people, is just you can pick a passion and helping them find out how to go as deeply as you want. It's something that really excites me. I know what excites me, but.
Yeah. One of the things that stuck out to me is that you now work for a guy who goes by Capcom.
Yes.
Which is funny. For those of you that don't know, that's a capsule communicator. That's the one person that gets to talk to the astronauts, and it came from one of the initial kind of liftoffs when they still lived in some little capsule.
Yeah, well, I mean, even during the Apollo days, the main spacecraft they spent most of their time in was called it was still called the capsule, because it really was a small room, quite confined space. Yeah, and for some reason, they thought that astronauts would only listen to other astronauts. So Capcom was an initialism, and it was a specific role. And you had to, in order to be Capcom, you actually had to be in the astronaut program. You couldn't be a scientist or a mission director. Only astronauts on the ground were considered privileged enough to talk to astronauts in the air. So they would actually have a translator, a person who sat in the chair. Everyone's yelling in the ear, tell them to do this and that, do that. Capcom would sit there calmly and say, okay, turn aux to 12. Okay. And so that was a really cool thing they kind of instituted to try to make the astronauts involved. Really, to be an astronaut, you had to do so many things. I could go way deep into how smart
I know you could. It's so awesome. Every time I talk to you, it's a real joyful journey. So astronauts and audio are not the only things that you're interested in. You've actually got a background in something else. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe not what you've done since high school, but how you came to get this kind of job invite from Helium? And maybe we start with we start wherever you want to start, actually.
Yeah. Well, I think growing up with parents who were kind of counterculture, I would call both my parents hippies. I grew up with a heavy sense of maybe questioning authority, which put me perfectly in the modern security industry. I'm just really thinking about how the world works, how we intend it to work, how it actually works, and security is the difference in between. So even as a kid, me and my best friend in elementary school, we invented our own codes and ciphers to pass notes. Not that the two of us boys had much to talk about, except maybe what was going on in Star Trek. But still super interested in codes and that cloak and dagger thing, and trying to also be a white hat hacker. Like how do we take our skills as hackers who know how security works to track down and almost kind of want to be part of the FBI to help be a force of good, but using our hacking knowledge and that always attracted me since third grade on. So that just sort of spelled my doom. And when I
or success. Exactly. Yeah.
Got into high school. I was so intensely interested in all sorts of things that I got to be able to privilege attend an independent study high school. I think mostly because I couldn't come into regular school on time. Just impossible to get me to wake up in the morning. And very fortunate that the public school system that I grew up in California actually had an independent study high school. It's also the school apparently where Winona Ryder went to, because I'm in that part of the North Bay where she was also from. And similar thing. She was on the road a lot. She needed some sort of schooling system. So in Marin County, there is a school for independent study stuff. And I got to do that towards the end of my high school years. Mm-hmm. And I parlayed that into getting a job at a game company that was also in the town that I was in, called 𝗿𝗏𝗀 Software. And there I met sort of my mentor, who was a gamer, a musician, and he was way into security. So he sort of found me on what you might call a text-based metaverse, which we call 𝗏𝗼𝗁. It's a choose your own adventure thing that I got into in high school. And he found me there and found some other people like me and said, look, I know you guys are young, but I was given a chance to become from a musician to become a computer system operator and a sound designer. I want to give you guys that chance. So he found a few of us and hired us, and I got my role as learning the internet and being security engineer for a gaming company. Right when
𝗚𝗏𝗀𝗏's pretty big. I remember that. I don't know. I played Nintendo. That's my kind of exposure to that.
Yeah, 𝗚𝗏𝗀𝗏 goes back actually to the 80s, founded by another brilliant person, Doug Carlston, and his brother Gary and his sister. And they really recognized how powerful microcomputers and computers in the home are going to be. And he went from being a lawyer to writing games. And they did some games that even made it into the arcade. A lot of them were like educational software. Where in the World is 𝐜𝐚𝐭 𝐿 was a big hit.
That's
kids
in
my generation. They helped publish that. They became a publisher. They helped find niche computer programmers who were doing really interesting stuff and said, look, you don't have the distribution network, but we're intensely interested in you and your ability to write code. Let's help publish your code. Put it on disk. We'll mass manufacture it. We'll pay you royalties. You'll get to control the rights and all these other things. And that's what their model was. But they also did some stuff in house, and they were getting on the internet, and I got to be part of that. So, but I did that as security minded. This was the internet, and we knew that getting on the internet exposed you to being hacked. And for your game company, you don't necessarily want to get hacked. Nobody does. But I got to work with people who were similarly paranoid like I was. Paranoid in a good way, that we really liked thinking about how things could break. And then I just sort of hopped jobs from there, but still staying security minded, always in that focus.
And you worked for, is it not cryptography.com? You worked for some crypto company, right?
Yeah. Well, we call it crypto company. I'm just call it Cryptography Company. And it really was cryptography.com, aka Cryptography Research Incorporated, or CRI. Later become part of Rambus. I spent a decade, 12 years there. Really enjoying that. It's a company that founded by a man named Paul Kocher while he was still kind of in Stanford and under the graduate work of a guy named Marty Hellman, who is very famous in the cryptography world. He's the H in 𝗱𝗏𝗀𝗏, if you ever get to hit that. One of the co-inventors of public key cryptography that we still use to this day. So anyways, Paul was way into it. He was a hardware hacker, really bright guy, found some critical vulnerabilities, found some crucial things that we think maybe even the NSA didn't know about hardware vulnerabilities, along with his friend Josh Jaffe. And I got to work with them and discover some of the deep things about how cryptography works down at the circuit level, learning deeply, like how could I, if I had a pen and pencil, paper and pencil, could I work out the SHA or RSA algorithm by hand? And I now can. It's very painful, but had to learn that level of stuff because we were trying to do things where we're
ridiculous how good you are.
No, it's just how geeky. Maybe not good.
Yeah.
But we had to understand, how electrons would be moving in the circuit, and if there's a way to sniff out the radio waves that come out of circuits to see if they might be leaking information you don't want to. And as that was just such a great journey, I got to be involved with Blu-ray standards and encrypting movies, working for phone companies that might have made the phone in your pocket, and consulting with them and helping them discover vulnerabilities that they might have in their firmware, and got to touch a lot of really cool stuff that still it's not like it's military secrets, but sort of NDA things, but that got me really interested. I'm like, I'm at the forefront of cryptography, and I'm getting to touch all these products that I can go home to my parents and say, Dad, pull that phone out of your wallet. Take a look at this.
Let me decrypt the SHA on that. Yeah. Whatever it is that you do. Okay. So we got the crypto side. We got this kind of cool upbringing where you got to learn in a different way than a lot of people. And then I'll leave this little tidbit there, is that you're also, as far as I understand it, a pretty good dancer. We'll leave the dancing mostly alone. It's
weird. I did not think myself as sort of very kinetic, of course, because I have a music background, which I didn't even touch at all. I thought I was going to be a jazz pianist. Maybe someday I still will be. I was deathly afraid as a geek of dancing, social interaction. I thought, it was going to be impossible. And, but something in me said, well, that's something I need to fix. That's the thing I'm most scared of. Let me go learn it. So I started swing dancing, which intersects with the kind of jazz that I know how to play and listen to, but it's kinetic. I got to connect with it. It was a life changer. I'm so glad I did that. It's coming up on maybe 15 years now that I've been doing that.
And you dance in competitions, right? Like you're not just kind of waltzing around in your living room.
Yeah, I probably could. I kind of shy away from that. There's people who like dancing for fun and people like dancing for competitions. When you do competitions, it's kind of like making it your job. Yep. And it takes a lot of the fun away. I know professionals who do that. They're some of my teachers. It can get draining after a while. So haven't really competed. No, but definitely go to a lot of big events.
I think you were telling me like you're going down to events. You're pretty serious about it.
Pretty serious. My girlfriend and I spend our vacations just going to dance events.
So awesome. Okay. So the last piece that I want to put in here before we talk about your kind of job right now is this fascination with radio. Is that you're a ham radio guy?
Yeah. As a kid, in addition to doing the cryptography stuff, I used to, I don't know how I got involved with it. My parents gave me a 50-in-1 Radio Shack kit, which is a kit that has a lot of electronic circuit components, and you wire them up with little springs. Really fun and easy to approach, and just fascinating. And I learned to memorize a very simple circuit that you can use as a AM radio, just about anyway. Take a diode and a crystal earpiece, you stick one end in the ground, throw an antenna up in the air, and magically you can start hearing radio, especially in my hometown where there was a radio station, KCBS, broadcasting many megawatts on the AM dial. So you could hear it everywhere. And it almost started coming out of the walls. It was almost hard to shut that radio up because things that weren't even intentionally radios were doing. So I got way into radio as a kid. And then when in my teens, I started connecting with people. A friend who I knew from the phone freaking world said, hey, instead of us trying to like hack the phone network so we can call each other from 24 miles away and not pay any money, of course that never happened, but why don't, there's a way we can talk to each other on ham radio across the county. He said, I'm going to get my ham radio license. Here's a book, study for it. So I did. And I got into the whole world of ham radio, which it's a giant world. The nice thing about it is you can pick and choose the parts you like. Mm-hmm. There is definitely a tinkerer part of ham radio, people who love to build their own radios from scratch and learn the physics about it. Many of the radio techniques that we use in our daily lives, like Wi-Fi or LoRaWAN, actually got their start by experimenters like me and other ham radio inventors who start out tinkering in our garages in this free radio band. And then some company forms around us. There's a guy named Phil.
Do you consider yourself an inventor?
I think I do. There's a lot of things that I've invented that just sort of stay in my house, and I haven't really made any practical applications outside of my own need, which I think fits the standard inventor model. Sure. They scratch their own itch first, and then some brilliant person helps them market it or find some need for the rest of the world. But definitely tinkering around in that and playing with radio stuff was super exciting to me because I've learned that one of the things that drives me is discovering the hidden world around us. If there's any phenomena or thing that most people that we interact with, but we can't see, I am intensely interested in that. And radio is one of those. It's these secret waves that influence the world around us. To be able to see into those, to build circuits that can listen to that radio and then build advanced algorithms and play with listening to, there's a wealth of data unencrypted flowing around us. And I got super interested in using my scanner radio to listen to what I knew were data transmissions, and then try to tease apart what that thing is. I've nearly gotten in trouble a few times. I think I have decoded and could break into the major water system of some water agency somewhere here in the Bay Area from playing around with that. So, but that's the theme. I like taking things apart to see the hidden world underneath. So if you find anything like that, I can explain why I'm interested in it. It's because of that. Okay.
So that puts us now at this point where I think, despite starting kind of way away from it, people understand. I think the only thing not to understand is why Helium didn't hire you sooner.
Yeah, that's true. I think they didn't think I wanted to work for them. There's a funny conversation when I later approached Amir and said, look, I think I actually probably should have a job here. Like, oh, why didn't you start sooner? I am kicking myself. I probably could have got in there right in the beginning. I don't know. It's just fate brought me there now. Thankful.
Yeah. You spent a lot of time on Discord really contributing and showing that you know what you're talking about. You were helpful. You're the kind of person that Helium wants, which is in general super sharp, super skilled at a couple different things, super helpful and driven to do an amazing job.
I will admit though, because I'm a security person and I push boundaries.
You did, yeah.
Definitely looking back at what I did and things, the way I approach things, I definitely got angry at Helium sometimes. You can go back there. I never deleted any of these posts, but I would get right up in front of the face and say, look, this algorithm's bad. You got problems here and there. You're punishing people who shouldn't be punished.
This is how we met. It was in November, December of last year.
That's true.
Yeah. You're yelling on Discord, and I was like, hey, I think what you have to say is good, but let's calm down and maybe.
So you'll often see me use the same approach when I have sort of become the calmer person, or the person to go. I find the smart people on the Discord are saying really good things, who know what's going on, who are maybe a little angry, or they're using tones that rubs a lot of the developers the wrong way. And
sure.
I find it my secret superpower to say, all right, let's sit down here. Use me as a punching bag. Okay, now you got out your system. Let's talk about your really great idea. Let's actually use this. And here's the other side of that story. Here's why things are the way they are. You're spot on. You found this flaw. This is why we haven't fixed it yet. And I really enjoy that part of this project. And I'm really glad that Helium doesn't see me as a super agitator, because I feel so bad when I go back and look at some of this.
Not anymore. There was a time for sure. You were kind of the number one agitator. Okay. So Helium hires you. What did they hire you to do? Because it isn't what I think they would have hired you to do.
Well, it's a little bit open-ended. At Helium, we're just looking for people who are intensely interested in the project and contribute in different ways. So I'm technically on the blockchain team, contributing to the core code, to the blockchain algorithms. I think a lot of times I'm useful because of my knowledge of the proof of coverage algorithm and how the radios actually work on the blockchain, how the hotspot firmware works, and also the cryptography part, like how does the crypto chip talk with the software, and are we using the right cryptography for certain things? How would we design a security protocol where things are certain blind between some actors and later revealed? I think it's really up to Helium to describe how they use me. My official job is software engineer.
Yeah, because you've got kind of all the parts. I know we had met on Discord. We started talking. You helped me with the giant antenna I put up on 𝐜𝐚𝐭 mountain that ended up getting a ton of attention because it was reaching so far, and you helped me kind of dial that thing down so it was within FCC limits. And then I think I had ordered, Bobcat sent me a free Bobcat because I was writing about Helium stuff. And as soon as I knew the thing to do was to immediately send it to you to see if there's whatever there was in it, you were going to be able to find it. There was zero chance I was going to find anything useful out of looking at that box. So you got it. We had some fun with it. We did some fun stuff and then kind of moved on. It was
incredibly educating for me. And we're still talking pre-Helium. I've only been there for 2 months officially, so I'm not an employee at that time. And you sent it to me. I was intensely interested. I want to know, how's the firmware boot up? If I wanted to remotely control this, how could I do it? Are there any weird things about the software? Discovered, tiny flaws that even Bobcat hadn't known. Things that they might need to fix, and just in the packet forward and stuff.
And that were common across all of the devices in the industry, right? All the hotspots, right? One of the flaws that you found was everywhere. It wasn't just Bobcat.
Yeah, and it definitely wasn't a Bobcat flaw necessarily. No. And let's see some parts about that. It was just intensely interesting to have one of those at hand, to take it apart gently, and make certain it was still usable. Yep. And it put me in touch with, in some sense, how seeing different manufacturers. I had seen how Helium approached making a hotspot, and they did that in the early days because they needed to make the first hotspots. But they knew instantly when they started doing it, we're not going to be in this forever. We're going to need to have manufacturers making their own. We need to widen this ecosystem. There may be manufacturers who can get incredible scale out and make these things cheaper. So it was interesting for me to be able to see how another manufacturer had approached it besides Helium. I had taken apart my Helium hotspot to death and put it back together in unusual ways. And being able to do that with Bobcat was definitely fun. And I'm glad that you sent that to me.
Oh, yeah,
I think I did get it back to you. Actually, it's at a new home now, but it's still functioning. And
living in, I think, Michigan, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did the Bobcat. I had ordered a Nebra months and months before. When that came in, I knew the right thing to do is immediately send it to you. I mean, just to give the listener an idea for how I don't use this term pejoratively. Like this is a term of honor for me, which is how geeky the Helium team was. I think it was the Bobcat. It might have been the 𝗫𝗓. But when you got it, you got rid of the box part, and then it was like a live stream Twitch of you going through this thing with, I don't know what instruments you have, and you're just like talking through everything you're doing. And I think this is on the mod side. And guys,
it was on the mod side. I think I started with Twitch stream, and that was for the Bobcat initially.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was showing, here's the serial console, and let's check their bootloader. Okay, interesting. It's using U-boot again too. And I can't quite get into here. Hold on a second. Rip it out, recompile a tool, send something else in. I'm glad you remembered that. We did that.
It was super fun just to watch that, and also to see on the Helium side, because there's this boundary where they can't say, well, here's what we did, but they can watch you and say, well, it's kind of like colder, warmer.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Again, I wasn't a Helium employee at the time when I did that Twitch, but it was moderated on the Discord. And later I got feedback like, yeah, we knew about that one particular thing, and we told them maybe they should do that one thing better. But we're not completely in control. And it was really fun to have that connection and to have the Helium team watching me do it too, and sort of kind of like go get them. We approve of you at least.
And kind of like a job interview. Like,
I guess so.
This dude's got the chops. Okay. So that kind of leads us to really what you do now and how you got into Helium and why the rest of this conversation is.
Well, we should back up a little bit because there's a little bit of overlap here and it may be confusing. Really around February, March of this year, again, we're going back maybe 9 months now, 2021. As the DY was being spun up, and we can go into what DY is, I was approached by Scott at DY and Helium kind of as well and said, look, we've been watching what you're doing. You've taken up all these hard spots. You really understand the security model. You understand where we're weak, where we could be better. And there's another guy, 𝗏𝗏, Andrew, a similar hacker. He's even nicer than me and more well-educated. And honestly, I think they would rather have had him there first. But he had a day job that he went off and did. But DY approached both 𝗏𝗏 and I and said, look, as Helium is going to stop making hotspots, we need to have a decentralized way so that the community can really, we want to get Helium out of the equation of making hotspots and make this open to anybody. We know if this token and this network is going to grow, it needs to adhere to the principles of a blockchain. And those are no one person's in charge. And so we still have this thing where we do need manufacturers to adhere to certain security standards because this blockchain is not proof of work. It's a proof of coverage. And proof of coverage, it's hard to bootstrap. And we'll get there one day where anybody can participate with any hardware they want. But right now it's a little bit delicate. We do need to know that there's a real radio involved. And it's possible to fake that radio out. And so by designing hotspots, at least have a security element in there. And we ask the manufacturers to do certain things with the firmware to keep it reasonably, to keep the honest people honest. It's important
to make it harder for the gamers. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. We want to make it the incentive to deploy a hotspot rather than putting it in a basement and try to earn tokens that way. So we're standing up a committee of people in the community who are not affiliated with any one manufacturer, who enjoy this as a hobby, and we would like you to be on this committee. In fact, we'd like you to be sort of the chairperson and start this up and help us find other people that are similarly situated where the community really trusts them. We know they're capable of understanding the problem, and we're going to hand the control over to this committee, the Manufacturing Oversight Committee. And, you guys will vote and talk to manufacturers and see if you think that hotspot's secure enough to be on the blockchain. You'll be the ones who actually approve it, and will tell the blockchain team to allow their hotspots to be onboarded. And that was the birth of
Let's pause there. Hang on, because this is super important, right? We kind of slid into it without announcing it, but you ended up being the chairperson of this MOC, the Manufacturing Oversight Committee. That name may change. Yeah. That committee is commonly misunderstood to be the kind of arbiter and executor, like judge, jury, all the rest of it, of all of the hotspots on the chain, and it is 100% not.
It's not, but I certainly understand the difference. But it was designed to fill one need, which is we need to make certain that the proof of coverage algorithm remains secure, so that we don't want manufacturers making hotspots that are just mining and not providing coverage.
Right.
And that was the other thing. Let's protect us from an evil manufacturer taking over the blockchain. And I can certainly see how people think, oh no, but you're in charge of making certain manufacturers adhere to the guidelines and that they have quality standards for the customers and they have a refund policy and all that other thing. And it's not what we do.
No, it's just setting the bar to, as I understand it, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm much more on the layperson side, is that it's saying the MOC, which you and I are both a part of, to be transparent, is saying we believe this manufacturer is capable of producing and delivering hotspots. We don't make any guarantees about that. And it's a caveat towards buyer beware. This is a great point that was made this morning in a meeting with Scott, where we are trying to build something that, if you're watching this, you haven't really seen this before. We're trying to build an ecosystem that is based on this idea of decentralization and permissionless joining. And in order to do that, it's going to be very different than anything you've seen before, especially in kind of the first world Amazon, iPhone, where you expect people to be kind of fully held accountable for their actions by someone else. And in this case, there is no someone else. The someone else is us, the buyers. And the only thing that this MOC does is to say, hey, they met this bar for being able to. Beyond that, there's no guarantee.
Yeah.
Is there any big part of that that's missing?
Well, I think there's a thing you said. You said two things. I think really we even need to split it apart. One is they're capable of making this, and then you said, and delivering it. We weren't even trying to say they're capable of delivering it. It was more like, this hotspot won't break the network. It's more of it's not dangerous. Therefore, that's what it is. Now, whether a manufacturer has the ability to manufacture that hotspot model at scale, set up a customer support network, all that stuff, is not something we consider. So it's
but
really...
But we ask in the application...
We do.
How have you made, or how many have you made before?
Yeah, and that's part of something that Helium had set up initially. I think the reasoning behind that, we've never really gotten deep into why we ask that, is to make certain that we have an entity. Ultimately, we're trusting someone's ability to program these keys. And so we want to see that we know where you live. And so if you've had a business who's been manufacturing before, it's hard for you to erase yourself and go rogue. That's my understanding of what we call the KYC process, which we're going to start publishing all those documents that we get from these companies. We're literally just trying to make certain there's a real person behind it who will feel affected and who is interested and knows that this is not an opportunity to create these giant gaming clusters for your own privilege. And that if you do, we will shut you off, and we know exactly who we're shutting off. That was my opinion of it. But, we're all kind of like in this community together. None of us is really in charge.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. So that brings up the last part of the MOC piece, I think, that is germane to this, which is there's only one tool the MOC has. Well, there's two tools, right? There's the initial bar that you have to get over, which I'm not an expert, but I'm thinking it's probably pretty low, right? Like it's not like anyone off the street can say, hey, I'm going to make a hotspot, but it's also not like only NASA can make hotspots, or only whatever the best manufacturers. Maybe NASA is not a great example. And then the only other thing that the MOC can do is to say you are no longer allowed to onboard new hotspots. Right.
So it is
there's
literally
nothing else in the middle, right?
Yeah, there's really nothing else in there. There's no contract signed. There are no legal documents exchanged. It's the bar is we want to make certain that one, you're going to make these for sale and not for self-consumption. And I think that's part of it. Or if you are making them for self-consumption, you're going to put them out there in the world. You don't want to see them in the basement. And what was the other big one? But the hurdle is enough to show that you should be able to produce X number of units. I think it might be convince us that you can produce 10,000. And then
with some kind of reasonable proof. And I think this is like, it goes back to this thing that is just super new for people, this decentralized permissionless thing.
And we could centralize it, but I think to the detriment of the network and to the token that the network represents. And I think it's important for us to recognize Helium is competing against other tokens. And the more we try to squeeze what we think are personal opinions of how this should work, the more dangerous it becomes to become irrelevant. And that's the part I think I try to bring to this, is that trying to represent Helium against other tokens and make certain that this is open enough that people believe in it, external people who even not necessarily contribute to the network, but are interested in the token and its ability to transfer data. They need to see that we're as hands-off as possible. And my dream is actually for the MOC, the committee, to disappear once the proof of coverage algorithm is advanced enough that we don't need these security features in there that we're trying to enforce, that the blockchain itself will make these decisions and it won't need us to help hold its hand. So that's a radical thing I want to introduce, and I think should be in our charter. But
I dig it.
A while to get there.
I think the whole thing is super, super cool. Okay.
But I do want to recognize one other thing that's really important is as a consumer, I really don't like seeing that people are like buying a hotspot and not getting it, or getting it and it falls apart. Except there's definitely room for the world to know about that and to get angry about. It's not something we've focused on. We're trying to prevent bad actors from entering the scene, but it's not to help hotspot owners. And I think we can do a better job of saying, look, don't look to us for guidance about what's going to be a good hotspot. We'll tell you what's going to be a bad actor, someone we think is suspicious as a manufacturer.
And that's the only protection that, I mean, protection is even too strong a word, but.
Well, let's talk about what we can do as a committee. Yep. We can basically tell the blockchain team whether to enable or disable the staking key for a manufacturer, which is the key. Whenever you put a hotspot on the blockchain, you do this, what we call add gateway transaction. And the add gateway transaction is a cryptographic transaction where the hotspot introduces itself, the owner of the hotspot introduces themselves, and the manufacturer introduces himself. And they all together combine this key, and that transaction gets signed, and then the blockchain will accept it as long as the manufacturer is an approved manufacturer. And what we're doing there is making certain that this hotspot is programmed with a key that we're certain is not going to leave the hotspot. It will be attached to the radio and incentivize the owner of that hotspot throughout the rest of its lifetime to actually be deployed. And that's what happens. We can turn that switch on or off. We can't ban a hotspot once it's on the blockchain.
Once it's on, it's on.
Once it's on the blockchain, it's on the blockchain. We don't have the ability to pull things off the blockchain. So our control in the MOC is basically say this manufacturer's key is sufficient for the time being for allowing hotspots on the network. And we can't even control what hotspots get onboarded. We'd have to take control of their key, which we did once. It's still major pain. I don't think we're ever going to do that again. So we just basically have this on-off switch, which can control I kind of feel like, imagine a big metropolitan city like New York, and it has one water pipe going in, and you're angry at one plumber in New York, and all we can do as the committee is shut off the entire water supply, which doesn't make the people who don't have issues with their plumber very happy. And, so just have this on-off switch is incredibly powerful to say whether new hotspots can be onboarded, but that's it. We can say yes or no for new hotspots.
Like, no new water flows into the city.
And of course, it makes people who had everything's going fine for them. It makes them very angry, especially if they had a hotspot and haven't onboarded it yet. So that's the tricky part. We're trying to keep our role as scoped as possible so that we do our job of protecting the network in the way that we think is dangerous. But I think there is room for people in the community to start talking about manufacturers and for our role to be seen as mostly like we make certain this hotspot is not going to bring the blockchain down, but that's it. We're not saying it's necessarily a good hotspot in the end, or the manufacturer is capable of a technical support team. We really, I want people to look less up to us for that role and find some other outlets or way to control
Which is,
that.
I mean, it's a business opportunity, right? For someone to come along and go and talk to all the manufacturers and say, hey, look, I'll certify your hotspot so that people know when they get my seal of approval, it's a good hotspot and they can trust that it's not going to fall apart or that it's going to actually work or the rest of it, right? So
yeah, and we can start using traditional controls there too. Like that seal of approval company can have a contract with the manufacturer and say, you only get to use the seal of approval and we will review you and audit you every few months. And, if we don't like things, we can even go to our traditional court. That manufacturer can be held to the country of standard that it's in. But as far as the blockchain is, like if you manage to get a hold of a hotspot that is approved, it should be able to go on the network. All these other things about how you acquire it or how you pay for it, we want to leave that up to other people to decide what's right for them. We don't want to get in the way of saying, no, it has to be via credit card and the warranty has to be 18 months. I personally have ideas about what I think goes in a hotspot, and there's certain manufacturers that I've approved, that we've proved together, that I would not buy a hotspot from because they're in countries that I have no control over.
Right.
I would have no recourse, or I have to pay crypto for them, and I don't feel comfortable doing that.
So this is an interesting piece, is that you're kind of in this position where you wouldn't buy a hotspot, but it's this kind of belief that both you and I think Helium in general share, is that like this world should allow people the opportunity to do a good job. And the only thing that should be really filtered out is the people who are obviously going to do a bad job. But everyone else kind of gets a shot at the title. That's
true. But I can recognize that people can interpret bad job in different ways. And I certainly understand what it means. Is like, oh, you make a hotspot and it falls apart. The network will carry on without that hotspot. Of course, it lose the coverage in there, but it will detect if that hotspot's not working and not reward it. What we don't want is a hotspot being rewarded for not providing coverage.
And we've had a couple of those. I mean, we could probably do another show just on the exploits of the network. It's been a pretty wild ride, but I think I'd like to kind of wrap up here with what do you see is coming next for, I guess, you and Helium? Let's say if we predict out 3, 6, 9, maybe 12 months. I don't think we can predict any further than that.
Yeah.
What are the big changes that you see coming that you're really excited about?
Well, absolutely. I think we're going to see more of Helium Incorporated, the company that started the blockchain. It's their intent to hand over as much of the keys and all the operation to the DY Foundation. So we're going to see things like that, where we're going to see more and more DYs taking over this role and that role. And you're going to see more DY employees actually be in charge of things. We'll start naming employees. We're going to have the DY is going to have more grants. It's going to be a big part of the thing, is using the power of this community to help make this blockchain better and going into other networks and things. My employer at the moment, Helium Inc., is going to be, I think, more like a favored contractor. I like to use this model of NASA and Boeing. Think about those two big names, right?
Sure.
NASA is the big organization that is sending things into space and in charge of America's space program, America's public space program too. But they don't do it all on their own. They hire contractors. They have people who have expertise. They take private industry work and they mix it together with their public policy stuff to produce some of the amazing things that we see in this world. And I like to think that I think DY and Helium Inc. are moving towards that model. DY is really going to be in charge of this blockchain. They're going to take over complete control of it, in so much as any one entity can take over control. They're going to be responsible for helping set the direction of where things need to go. And they will ask Helium, with their expertise and programmers, to implement a lot of these things. But it will be an ask rather than Helium saying, let's do this and we're going to change it this way. Because that's ultimately what makes any blockchain successful, is there's very little one entity controlling it. And so I think you're going to start seeing things like that. So like DY is NASA, Helium Inc. is Boeing, and there can be other companies involved in there and other individuals who can contribute in many ways. I think that's one of the fascinating things I love about this project, is this embodies so much of what I call the open effect network, where anybody who's talented enough and has the passion can be welcomed in and make a significant contribution to the network. The way we see reward scaling right now, which has been an amazing thing of helping to make certain that people like seek out new areas to put in hotspots rather than putting them up in a dense area, is the work of 𝗓𝗏, who came up with this an equation of like, okay, how do we make the blockchain incentivize people to distribute widely? And it's had an amazing effect that people are very concerned about what other hotspots are around them now and whether they should go find out new spots to seek out. And that was an individual contributor who doesn't work for DY or Helium. There's so much of this blockchain can benefit from people who are actively interested in sitting on that Discord. I see it every day. And I'm so excited that we can build something where kind of rags to riches. Someone who's unknown invents an idea. We had all adopt it as a community. And this is the forum that does it.
Yeah, it's radical. Jeremy, I think that's a rad place to wrap it up. I love the message. I love kind of sharing your story with the world. You're one of my favorite people in all of Helium. I'm super excited they hired you. Like I said, I wish they would have hired you a lot earlier. I think they'd be even better than they are, which is pretty awesome already. But thanks a ton for sharing your time with us, and super psyched to see what you do going forward.
Awesome. We'll catch you on the chain, as we say.